This is CTO Insights, a podcast on engineering leadership. I'm Katerina, your host, and I'm here to bring you insights from senior engineering leaders and experts on creating a culture of high performance. Today, I have the great pleasure to host David Heinemeier Hansson, co-owner and CTO at 37 Signals, creator of Ruby on Rails, and racing driver. David is known for his bold opinions and even bolder statements, like comparing racing and programming, highlighting the flow state where intense focus takes over. I'm thrilled to talk to him today and get his take on creating a culture of high performance. In this episode, we discuss how overwork is a sign of poor work organization, how you can create a culture where people deliver more while working less. We talk about the ability to get in a flow state as opposed to being busy with unproductive work. We also talk about metrics, or more precisely, not having any, and discuss the unique approaches that enable 37 Signals to deliver an exceptional product for over 20 years without blindly following all of the software development standards. This episode is brought to you by Adiva, a global talent network that connects companies with top-tier tech and product talent ready to hit the ground running. With the ability to introduce a candidate within 24 hours and an exceptional 98% success rate on trial engagements, Adiva offers the flexibility for companies to scale their teams up or down as needed. If you're looking to expand your team, drive momentum in new projects, or need to backfill a role, Adiva might just be the solution you need. Visit adivait.com to get started.
David, welcome. Thank you for accepting my invite to join me today.
Thanks for having me.
I want to kick off with this powerful statement about overworking. So you say overwork is not a sign of commitment, but rather poor work organization. Let's stop there, and I want to get your take on all of this. Where do traditional managers go wrong with the way work is being done right now?
I think certainly when it comes to overwork, there's a tendency to think that you can outwork everyone when really the main lever of whether you're going to win or not is whether you have better ideas, whether your execution is better, all the elements of what's in that work more so than the volume of it. Now, that's something that's true, I believe, in my industry. Maybe Elon, maybe firing rockets to Mars, maybe different rules apply when literally gravity doesn't. But I think here on Earth, when you're dealing with a little bit more mundane problems, you'll find that 40 hours is enough. 40 hours is actually plenty. The main difficulty is finding a way for those 40 hours to connect, to not be sliced into little work moments, but to have long stretches of uninterrupted time. When I look at the kind of work that we do at 37 Signals, the kind of problems that we solve, I see repeatedly the solutions come from someone sitting down 3, 4, 5 hours in one stretch, immersed into a given problem. And I also see other companies not really allowing for that because a calendar is full of these Tetris blocks that break everything up, these meeting calls, these standing operations that someone has to do not on their own intellectual or creative schedule, but on the schedule that their calendar dictates. And when that happens, people very often end up in a situation where they can spend an entire week working and then waking up Friday afternoon from all that work thinking, wow, what a busy week, but what did I get done? Yeah. What did we actually accomplish? Well, I sat in a bunch of meetings and well, that's not it, is it? That's not what moves things forward. It's not what delivers the breakthroughs. It's not how the product is necessarily improved. So I think the focus in tech in particular has just been way too much on the volume, the number of hours, and not nearly enough of what we spend those hours on. And I find that to be a far more interesting discussion because we're already so capped. So you're going to work yourself to the bone. How much are you going to work? You're going to work 60 hours a week, 80 hours a week, 100 hours a week? That's not even an order of magnitude. That's at best, it's double what I would work. That's not that much. That's not a big lever to move in comparison to spending each individual day with a bit more purpose, with a bit more dedication to making the hours that you have count.
I love it. I love how you put it. Like it's not much more if you compare hours to hours, but then if you compare focused work to unfocused work, then the difference is, it's great.
It is enormous. And I think this is one of the things that we often hear when people are surprised by the few number of individuals we have working in our company. At our entire company, working on Basecamp, working on Hey, working on Ruby on Rails, working on all of these frameworks we're into, we have about 12 Ruby programmers in total.
Oh, really?
There are companies orders of magnitude larger than us that will dedicate 12 developers to some tiny little sub-sliver of what it is that they do because they're not able to get that kind of productivity out of people. And I think what's also especially appealing to me about treating and approaching work in this way is that it's simply more fun. There is few things more rewarding in creative work than actually solving problems, than actually shipping solutions. Mm-hmm. And most creative people I know, whether they're programmers or designers or writers or whatever, they get their kick out of that. They don't get their kick out of all the around stuff. They don't get their kick out of stand-up meetings. They don't get their kick out of even one-on-ones. They don't get their kick out of all the surroundings things. Now, some of that surrounding stuff has to be there. There's sort of the hygiene factors to make sure that everything is okay. But the bulk of the focus needs to be on shipping great work. That's what motivates us. That's what gets us fired up. That's what inspires us. And what I found time and again is that creative people, if you can keep them in the zone, if you can keep them in that creative sort of highland, not only are you going to get a lot more done, but they're also going to enjoy it so much more. And everyone is going to enjoy it so much more. Working in a group of people that are all committed to shipping great product, all committed to spending the vast majority of their time on that problem solving, on that creative work, it's just invigorating. There are very few things that I know better than really solving important, interesting, meaningful problems with a group of intelligent, creative, driven people.
I want to talk a bit more about, small teams and how you always say small teams can achieve big things, big teams can not achieve small things. And by the way, there are so many great things on your website, like when you land on it, the values and the beliefs that I will just quote throughout this conversation. And I think it's just the website content is kind of material for, I don't know, maybe a series of podcasts, but I'll try to be brief. What I want to dig into is you compare the state of flow people get or you get from programming with the state of flow you get from racing. And I heard this on your talk last year on Code Talks. I loved it. Now, I want to understand the approach you take. Is it something like, is it a culture you create that fosters this, enables the state of flow for people and enables them to focus? Or is it also something due to individual dedication? And because working remotely, people can get distracted by 1,000 things that are not, connected to your work culture. So how do you balance this? And is it anything you do in the screening process or in coaching, onboarding people that kind of supports them to get into this mindset?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. As we just talked about, that state of flow, that maybe we should define it. For me, the state of flow is wonderfully described in this book called, I think it's just called Flow by Mikhail. I'm going to butcher his last name, so I won't even try. Who was actually interested in studying happiness. This author and psychological researcher was interested in studying happiness. And what he found time and again when asking people about their happiest moments was he found the description of flow. This notion of being engrossed in a problem in the moment and forgetting time and space. You think you've sat at the keyboard for 10 minutes, it's actually been 2 hours. This notion that all the other things you have in your life, all the other things you could be thinking about, all the other distractions that exist and try to pull you away, they fade. And there is only the focus on the task of hand. And as you mentioned, this is something I feel when I drive a race car as well. This is one of the wonderful, quirky parallels between programming and race car driving. When I shut that race car door and I go out on the track and I'm going 200 miles an hour, it is a very fostering environment for getting a state of flow because, well, at the most extreme, your life literally depends on it. If you make egregious errors because you're distracted, you're going very fast in a metal box that will crumble if it hits a wall. Actually, it's not a metal box, it's a carbon fiber box. But nonetheless, this idea that you need all of your attention, you need all of your focus, you can't spare any of it for distractions because, well, you're not going to be fast, you may get in trouble, and that could have at least expensive consequences and quite possibly hurtful consequences. It is harder to get those kinds of pressures to bear on creative work because there's not a risk, at least in the immediate short term, that if you're distracted while you're programming, you're going to crash into a wall, right? So we have to work a little harder. We have to essentially try to cultivate the environment that's going to allow us to have these long stretches of uninterrupted time. And as I said before, the main part of that for us is to avoid calendar Tetris, is to avoid having all these falling blocks of color that fill up the day and makes the day look busy, when in fact the day is empty. It's empty of the kind of space you need for creative work. You need these big, long blocks. Now, even if you do have those long blocks, as you say, you could still get distracted. You don't have a meeting, but maybe you surf the internet. Maybe you get pulled into some discussion somewhere that's not the problem you're solving with. I find that the most effective remedy for that is to have individuals work on problems, A, that they care about, that they have some connection to, that they can see some end result from, that they're not just cogs in some anonymous wheel, that they don't know where it's going. They don't know who's benefiting. They can't even see whether the product of their work is good or not. This is one of the reasons why we really like solving our own problems. When you solve your own problem, as we do, for example, with Basecamp. Basecamp is for project management of companies of all types, and we use Basecamp to develop Basecamp. So every single developer or designer or product person at 37 Signals who's working on Basecamp is getting this immediate, constant feedback. Is what I'm doing working? Is it good? Is it better? We're, as you say in the software world, dog fooding all of the things that we build. And that provides just a steady stream, I think, of returning focus. Even if your eye wanders for a bit, it'll be brought back to task because you'll have to use the thing you're building and you will realize, oh, I don't like that thing. I don't like that thing. I don't like that thing. Or you'll realize this idea we had for the feature isn't actually quite right. If now that we're using it, we realize, you know what? I thought it needed to be like this, but it actually have to be like that. That level of intimacy with the problem itself, that you have a relationship with the problem, is a key driver, I think, of keeping you on task and keeping you focused. The other thing that I've been interested in for well over 20 years is your tool set. There are some people who believe, well, I can work with whatever. It's just tools. Who cares about the tools? This is just what we need to get our job done. I don't believe that's true at all. I believe that if you are able to, I would say for myself, fall in love with your tools, you're going to have a much easier time staying on task because you're simply going to enjoy the mechanics of solving the problem. The first thing I was talking about, getting intimate with your problem, is about the outcome. Do we know whether what we're building is good or not good or how customers might respond to it? Okay, that's great. That's the product of what we're building. But then there's also the method. There's how we're building it and the tools we're building it with. And they really matter too. I certainly found that after I discovered the Ruby programming language, my career just took a vertical climb because the environments I'd been working with before They were fine. I'd been working with PHP, I'd been working with Java, I'd been working with some Perl and some Python and then some ASP.NET back in the day. They were fine. They were able to achieve those outcomes I was looking for. They were able to produce web applications and websites. Okay. But Ruby inspired something more. Ruby inspired me to become a better maker, to become a better programmer, to fall in love with the method of making these things that we're looking for. And I think if you do that, and if you are also so blessed that you can actually work on your own tools, this is what I've done with Ruby on Rails, the web framework that I built on top of Ruby. Now you're really in a virtuous circle. Because as you're building, you will invariably find inconveniences with your tools or grips that aren't quite right. And if you're able in that process to iterate on your tools and create tools that are more and more in tune with the kind of problems that you're solving, more and more fit for purpose, I find that to be just absolutely not only fascinating, but rewarding. And if you can then do that in a team spirit, that I'm improving my tools over here and that helps you over there, and we can share those improvements back and forth, now I think you really have the ingredients for a kind of work that you'd love to get up in the morning to do.
So all of your products are basically solutions to your own problems, right? And frameworks, Rails.
Largely speaking, yes. I will say not everyone that we employ at the company have all the problems we're trying to solve, but there are people inside of the organization who have that problem. It's also true, though, that the further removed that problem is for the majority of the people building it, the harder it is to build well. We saw this with a product we had, still maintain, but no longer sell to new customers, called Highrise, a customer relation management system, a CRM. Jason and I had some CRM problems. Most of the employees at 37 Signals did not. So it was harder to do the CRM. Highrise is the name of the product. It was harder to do Highrise well than it was to do Basecamp well. Because with Basecamp, literally everyone working on that product knew something about product management because they were part of a project. They were part of the collaboration. They kind of knew what they needed themselves. Now, there's still room for someone in the organization to be the product manager, to have the big overarching vision of where we're going and why we're going there, have more intimate relationships with the kind of customers that we're pursuing. And I think all that is good, but I think you're especially blessed if you can stumble upon a problem where the majority of the people working to solve it also have some relation to it, also have some degree of capacity to evaluate whether what we're building is good or not.
So that's where those autonomous teams come in, basically. They can see the problems themselves, they can suggest a solution, they can even find a way to realize it themselves, right?
Yes, so we use a methodology called ShapeUp that we developed at 37 Signals. It's at basecamp.com/ShapeUp. And that describes how we approach product development. And we approach it in this way of the pitch. The pitch is a rough sketch of a solution. Well, it's a sketch of both the problem and the solution, such that when someone is tasked to implement that, to solve that, they have an idea of the boundaries of what this looks like, but the boundaries are drawn with a very thick marker. They're not detailed pencils in. The pitches we do not have high-resolution UI mocks. There are no Figma files. All of that space is left open for the people who work on the project. And the reason we do that is twofold. One is it then requires the people working on the problem to actually understand the problem. Because there's not just a laundry list of tasks that they're responsible for doing. They're responsible for finding the tasks. There's a rough outline of what a solution ought to look like, perhaps should look like, but it's full of gaps. It's full of space that needs to be filled in by the people who are actually working on it. And what we found time and again is that that level of abstraction or that level of detail is very useful combined with an appetite for how long we're going to spend on this. So we work in these 6-week cycles where We decide what we're going to work on. And then there's 6 weeks for that work to happen within. And we kind of sit on our hands as product managers in terms of coming up with new ideas. That means that the maximum time you can spend on any one feature project at 37 Signals is 6 weeks. Now, R&D on greenfield new product development is a little different. We can talk about that too. But when we're talking about established products like Basecamp or like Hey, we give any new features a maximum of 6 weeks. So that's the appetite. Sometimes the appetite is half that because it's not a huge feature. So we say, you know what? Here's 3 weeks, a rough outline of what we're trying to accomplish. You figure out how that matches. You figure out how that lines up. And what we found is that humans are actually exceptionally good at meeting those kinds of deadlines. You can call them that. You can call them deadlines, even if that's a little bit of a no-no word sometimes in software development. But I don't mind that at all. We call it appetites, but you could call it deadlines too. People can hit that if you leave the scope flexible. If you leave leeway where they can decide, you know what, here's a Cadillac version of what we're building. Do you know what? Can't quite afford that in this instance. We're going to go with the Toyota version. Mm-hmm. We're going to go with the functional plain version in this circumstance. And then in maybe some other circumstance, we are going to embellish and we are going to gold platinum a bit. But it's all left open and flexible such that as we're working through the project, we will first of all discover what the problem really is. Whenever we've tried to detail any meaningful size problem, we always find that the problem definition is not clear until the end. You learn so much as you build. And if you want those lessons to be able to inform the building, you have to leave things open. If we try on day one of a new project to define all details of that project and exactly what should happen, in which order, and all the stuff, we are making choices when we know the least. You know the absolute least about this problem before you've started developing it. Now, this is not shape of wisdom or 37 Signals wisdom. This is general purpose, agile software development wisdom that you should rush to running software. That running software will inform you about where to go next and which path to take and so forth. So this combination of having the pitch, the rough outline of what it is, because it's important also to stress here, there are folks who might say, well, that's what we do. Like we have Jira or whatever, and we have all these tickets coming through, and the tickets are one-liners like, build a to-do section. What does that mean? What does it mean? You have not wrestled with any of the product thinking in that ticket. That's not enough. So when I say you should leave some details open, I'm not saying you should just hand over a blank piece of paper. You need to define the outline, because otherwise it becomes this kind of just amorphous feature factory where no one actually knows or thinking about what we're building. We're just trying to churn through tickets as quickly as we possibly can. And the kind of software that results from those feature factories, do you know what? It's not what most users like to use. Those feature factories are often associated with kind of checkbox style product development. Customers say we need a to-do section so I can set a checkbox on my comparison chart with our competitors. Yeah, do you know what? I don't think that's going to be very good. I don't think whatever you're building is going to be very good if the purpose is just to check a box, not to actually solve a real problem, and so forth. So it exists in this space in between the rigorously Figma detailed design of everything, which I don't think works, and this is just a card or a line on Jira scrolling off with no detail, no consideration. In between those two things, there's space for product thinking that isn't rigid, that is flexible to the product solution, and that lends the builders the kind of credibility and trust that they could actually figure it out, that they're going to have some of the answers, that wherever else in the organization this feature idea comes from, they don't know everything, whether that comes from me or from Jason or from Brian, our product strategist. We don't have all the answers. We have some clues about which way to go, but the people who are actually doing the work, they're going to sit with the majority of the answers. So we should trust them that they can deliver something good within the appetite that we've specified, and that they can make the right trade-offs between what needs to be in there, what's a nice to have, what's a possible maybe sometimes in the future.
Now, this makes a lot of sense when people that build a product actually use the product. Let's imagine a scenario of a kind of traditional Scrum team, and it's funny when you put it like that because Scrum was supposed to be anything but traditional. But anyway, so you have a regular software team splitting responsibilities between designers, QA, developers, all of that, and then a Jira board with detailed or not very detailed tickets. What are the most essential things of ShapeUp or your process that you would apply in this setting to help them, maybe not instantly, but with the smallest investment, gain some benefits in terms of shipping work faster and having a more performant team? And also, like, if the developers are not as involved, or people that are on the field, developers, designers, are not as involved with the end-to-end product, and they are not sure about the features, how would you connect the product team or product manager within all this scope?
Yeah, so I think first of all, you are correct. Scrum or Scrum-like approaches, that's the mainstream now. That's our waterfall. That's where most people exist when they just do the default of what this industry believes is the process for software development today, which is interesting because when I came up in the software development world, agile software development, of which Scrum at least proclaims to be an offspring, that was the heretical notion. We were inspired by the Agile Manifesto with lines like people over process. Now, I think that one is a good one because holy smokes, does Scrum have a lot of process. In fact, I think this is just some of the normal entropy, reverse to the mean stuff that happens to software methodologies when they've been allowed to live and prosper for 20 years. That I'm sure the first intentions of the Scrum designers or the Scrum creators was not this bastardized version has turned out to be. But this bastardized version is comporting itself to what lots of corporations think they want. They think they want the feature factory. They think they want what appears to be the predictability of that. They think they want story points. No, they won't. No organizations want any of that. What they want is great working software delivered with high quality as quickly as possible. I find that most of the Scrum practices I hear about and most of the Scrum mastering is very far removed from that ideal. So I don't know if you can just introduce this one weird trick and then you're going to make Scrum work. I don't know if that's possible. What I would suggest instead is if someone is interested in a different way of working, which really is the first point, before any methodology change can be successful, there has to be a motivation. There has to be a recognition that whatever we're doing right now is not working, or it's not producing the kind of outcomes that we're after. So that provides the motivation and commitment to actually trying something new. I think a lot of software methodologies have been introduced into teams who didn't even know, why was this coming? Who asked for this? And sometime who asked for this was the CTO who had gone to some conference and heard about Scrum and then invited some speaker to come and be a consultant or Scrum master and teach us all these things. I have seen that repeatedly fail. I think that to really get use out of a solution, you have to have some understanding that there is a problem in the first place. So start there. Start by analyzing, what is it that's not working? Are the features we're delivering not of high enough quality? Or more to the point, are they not right? Are they not what actual users want? Are they not making the product better? Or do we have other problems like we're just splattering, we're just shooting all over the place. We have no idea what we're arguing for or are trying to achieve. So we end up just with a bunch of random features that are barely connected under one sort of garbage bag model of product development. Well, maybe your problem actually isn't the software methodology itself. Maybe the problem is, as you say, you're too far removed from your customers. So one traditional solution to that is that you get a product manager who will be that liaison to the customer. That can work sometimes. Original Agile software methodology actually advocated for getting an actual customer involved, getting an actual end user representative onto the team. And I think a lot of operations or teams have found that to be difficult for a variety of reasons. And this is why we get all these other intermediaries. But if you're going to have an intermediary, I think the product manager is the right answer. That there's someone on the team who is responsible for gauging whether what we build works or not. Now, what's interesting about product managers is they kind of come in two flavors in my observation. There's the kind of product manager who have no opinions, who is simply tabulating things like feature requests and counting them up in a little spreadsheet. 17 people have asked us this quarter for this feature. That means that's what we should build. To me, that's the kind of product manager that embodies the Microsoft spirit. This is why, historically speaking, a lot of Microsoft products were really crappy in version 1 and version 2, because they were driven by product managers who, in Steve Jobs' immortal words, had no taste. They did not know where they were trying to go. They had some capacity to sort of herd the cats, to get people producing something, but until there was feedback into that system, it could not produce good software. That system relies on live feedback from customers, and you can't get that until you build something. So Microsoft would just build something really crappy, or they would clone something. They would be a copy of something, and then they would iterate. And do you know what? What's fascinating about that model is, even though that's certainly not my preferred style of software development, it can work if you have a long enough time horizon. If you're patient enough to say, like, yeah, I don't care, version 1 is going to be total shit, but version 3, which is going to be here in 7.5 years, is actually going to be quite good, because users will tell us exactly what's wrong with that version 1 and what's wrong with that version 2. So that's one style of product manager. I think a different style of product manager, which is what we try to do here, is product managers who actually have an opinion, who have taste. I'm not necessarily even saying whether it's good taste or bad taste, but have taste in the sense that they will decide on their own, through their own gut instincts, through their intermediacy with the problem. What are we going to work on? How should it look? What kind of features go together? How do we create a cohesive product? How do we say no? This is one of those key tools that's actually quite difficult for the, let's call them, customer-focused product managers to do. I think we should all be customer-focused, but there's some that are exclusively customer-focused, and I don't think that's good. They have a difficult time saying no. They have a difficult time acting on the behalf of users rather than just on their request. When 17 people show up and they request this one feature and it's at the top of the list, that kind of product manager will go like, well, of course we should build that. And we should build it like they're telling us to. They're literally telling us what solution they just want another checkbox. Okay, we add one more checkbox. Now you run that style for 2, 3, 5, 10 years. Suddenly you have 147 checkboxes on one garbage bag page where literally everything is crammed in exactly as the customers requested it. That's a mess. And that's one of the reasons that that style of software development usually has a tendency to produce sort of this peak and then this fall down. You start with a product that's really bad because you don't know what you're building. You don't know why you're building. You're just throwing something out there. Maybe you're copying something. Then you get feature feedback from actual early adopter customers, and you can't do all of it. So you'll implement the most pertinent. And the product will get better, and it'll get better and get better. And then at some point, it's going to hit a plateau. You've covered most of the bases, but customer feedback keeps flowing in. People keep requesting new features and new changes. So you just keep adding and adding and adding. And suddenly, without really noticing, the problem or the product actually gets worse. I think this is one of the truisms that most people in the abstract can relate to, that software products that have tons and tons of features, especially if they're not super related, has a tendency to get worse. It gets harder to understand. It gets harder to learn. It gets harder to just wrap your head about. It gets harder to remember. All these attributes start accumulating the more you just add to, and the worse and the worse and the worse the product gets. And then you get to these kind of jokes like, what does Salesforce do? Like, what even is it? Right? Where you go like, do you know what? There was there was a starting point where anyone working at Salesforce could clearly define what is Salesforce? What are we trying to solve for what customers? And now the answer is like something, customers for everyone, customer journey satisfaction, whatever. It's just empty, buzzwordy things that describe a bag of features requested by millions of people over the course of 20 years. Okay, I can't relate to that kind of software development. So we try to avoid that fate by embracing constraints, by not having hundreds of developers and designers work on the product. In fact, by being extreme in the other direction. Even at the height of feature development at a steady state for Basecamp, we would probably have had 5 or 6 developers working on the web side of things and maybe 3 designers. I mean, that's not a lot of people. That means you actually have to make choices about what you're working on. It has to mean you can't build everything that people request. You have to answer their requests by aggregating their wishes, their demands in a way that becomes generic. So you get 10 feature requests. They're all different, but you lean back and you zoom out and you realize, oh, these are pointing to a common problem that very often is not articulated by those customers. They're all asking for, can I get this checkbox here? Can I make the system stop doing that? No. The problem was actually deeper. That's the task of product development, that you dive into those problems, you figure out what the root cause is, and you come up with a simple solution that solves all of these separate problems that doesn't seem like they're maybe connected at first glance, but are if you dig deeper. And this is how we try to retain the simplicity of something like Basecamp that actually does quite a few things. The pitch of Basecamp is that this is a one-stop solution such that tasks don't fall through the cracks, and it is trying to appeal to quite a lot of people, and it has existed for 20 years. All of those are factors that would have led us to the same fate as something like Salesforce if we had had unlimited time, unlimited resources, unlimited people to work on it. So some of it is to have and develop a humility that is, do you know what? If I'm surrounded by cake and wine and whatever, I'm going to indulge in all of it. If it's right there and I just have to reach out and then I get everything I want, do you know what? I'm going to turn into a fat, messy slob. And software is the same way. If software just has all the resources to expand it and increase it and whatever, it's going to turn into this blob that no one in the end really likes. And I think this is the irony. Every individual customer will tell you, oh, your software is great, but there's just this one thing. If it just did this one thing, it would really be great for me. And then they'll state their feature request. And they will be correct for them individually, but they're not individuals. Software is used by many people. And if we take 10,000 people who all have that, right? The software's great, but could you just add this one thing? And then we add 10,000 things. None of the 10,000 people will like the outcome. And that's the irony.
This is amazing. And I'm just wondering how much of it is influenced by you knowing your customer focus and not going after enterprises. And if you were to target enterprises, or you were to not become Salesforce, but have their focus in terms of customers and service and everything, how would you approach it? Would you still be able to do it with such a small team? Or do you think you would have to scale the team somehow?
I don't think you can make enterprise software with a small team. And I'll go even further. I don't think you can, over the long run, make good enterprise software. I think the arc of enterprise software is always towards a ball of shit. There's simply only ways of delaying it. And I think it's great if you can delay it. And this is the circle of life, right? This is how new startups are able to get a foothold, because the old industry heavyweights have gotten so lethargic, so large, so everything to everyone all the time, that there's these openings to come up with new solutions. But I do think making enterprise software is very difficult. And it's very difficult for this basic reason that each individual customer that you're trying to get represents such an enormous, or potentially such an enormous, economic value to so many people who are directly incentivized by landing that account. I'm talking about salespeople here, that they are incentivized, like their salary is literally drawn from whether they will land this account. And the bigger the account is, the bigger the bounty, the bigger the commission, and also the more demands they have. If an organization, an enterprise organization, is going to spend a lot of money on a piece of software, they usually show up with a whole laundry list of requirements. Yeah, I know you sell the software to other people. Well, really, really need this one thing. And what do? You want to close the sale. The salesperson wants to get the commission. The sales manager wants to increase MRR. Like, all of these incentives are built towards accepting that customer's demand, because that customer has real power. And it is such a curious disposition or dichotomy, I should say, that when you sell to small and medium-sized businesses, you have the power to give them what they need rather than what they ask for. As we talked about, when you accede to every enterprise customer's demand, you eventually end up with the stereotype of enterprise software. That is something designed by purchasing managers. It's not even designed by the users. The users don't even get to make the requests. It's the purchasing manager. It's the contract negotiator. It's what will make them look good. It's their checklist of, does it do the things we think it needs to do? We don't actually have to use it. So I don't even care whether it's good or not good, as long as it appears that it can check these boxes. That's an awful person to put in charge of software design. But that's what happens with enterprise software. You put the purchasing manager in charge. That is the person with the most power over setting the direction. When you sell to small and medium-sized businesses, as we do, first of all, there's no purchasing manager. There's never this intermediary step. There's never this individual who will buy your product and then never use it. That doesn't exist. The vast majority of people who buy Basecamp, for example, are either small business owners or team leads or other folks who are trying to solve an actual problem that they have and they feel. Therefore, they're quite good at evaluating alternatives in a way that a purchasing manager at a big Fortune 500 never could, because they don't have the information. They don't have the feedback from actually trying to use the things. The small and medium-sized business owner or stakeholder or buyer has that information, which makes them far more informed, which means that they're much more discerning, which means that the competition to actually make legitimately good software that users enjoy to use is very high. And that means we're forced to simply make good software. Because if we don't, there's no salesperson to take you out for a steak dinner to convince you to buy it anyway. Like, that mechanism of persuasion doesn't exist. The main mechanism of persuasion is simply good software. So I think that's a much healthier way of arriving at good software. It's also not necessarily always as profitable. I mean, I could totally understand the appeal of why people go with the enterprise sales pattern and sales playbook. It is a much easier way to scale revenue. It's still quite hard to make a profit. You can look at most of these large software companies, including many we're in competition with, and if you look at their public accounts, you'll see strange things like, we spent $300 million on sales and marketing, and we took in $120 of revenue, or $120 million of revenue. And you're like, those two numbers, like, they seem strange. Well, there we'll go. No, it doesn't matter. Because by the time we've locked in an enterprise customer, they're going to stay with us forever. There's so much inertia inside huge organizations that even if you sell them the crappiest piece of software, they'll continue to pay every month, every year for the next 10 years, or at least until the next organizational reorg or something else like that. Which reminds me of this glorious scene from one of my favorite action movies of all time, RoboCop. And in RoboCop, you have the OCP organization, which is this conglomerate that produces everything. And there's a scene where this robot they're building, which is called the ET-209, where the vice president of the company gets into an argument about the fact that ET-209 doesn't work. And it actually just killed one of their executives in a demonstration. And he launches into this tirade. Who cares if it worked? We had contracts for 25 years of spare parts. That's the sentiment, right? Who cares if it works? Who cares if it works when you're selling enterprise software, as long as you can get the deal signed? Because you probably will have 25 years of spare parts to sell that organization. It's a really potentially quite dystopian notion of work in general. This idea that we don't have control over our tools. They're being picked by purchasing managers who are more interested in looking good in terms of how much of a discount they can get on the per seat pricing, how well the spec sheet compares for this version versus the other version. And it is interesting that the richest companies in the world, that's what these enterprise companies are. These are the largest, most quote unquote successful companies, are by far the worst at picking software. That the institutional incentives almost require them to buy shitty software. So this is one of the reasons we have never pursued the enterprise market. It's not the kind of company we want to build. We don't want to build a company that's just chock full of enterprise salespeople. I'm sure there's some very lovely, nice people. This isn't about individuals. It's about structural incentives. And the structural incentives you have when you design, develop, and sell to small and medium-sized businesses is, I better build some good stuff. If I don't build good stuff, they won't buy it. They won't stay. They will change. I like that kind of pressure. I like those kind of constraints.
You don't like long-term planning. I mean, you don't practice long-term planning in too much detail. I'm wondering, and you obviously have your long-term vision for the products and the company. How do you align, short-term planning and focusing on the immediate value you create for customers, and then the long-term vision? And also, how are the teams aligned with all of that?
Yes, so we don't set long-term goals. We don't have revenue targets. We don't have roadmaps. We don't have any of the normal, we don't have KPIs. We don't have OKRs. We don't have any of the normal instruments. And I say the word normal, and it's brings a little revulsion up in me that like, this is normal. This is what we consider normal. That this is how software companies ought to run, maybe. I don't even know if it's prescriptive as much as it's just descriptive. But if we just even take the descriptive part, we don't do any of that stuff. We talked about the 6-week cycle. That is our main moment where we make decisions. We make decisions about the near term, because the near term, you know something about. You don't know all of it, as we talked about. Even when you're just planning a feature that's going to take 6 weeks to build, you're going to learn a lot when you do that. So we try to reduce our appetite for planning to the shortest time frame possible. For us, that's 6 weeks. And that means that any specific features, any specific direction that the product is going to go is going to be revisited every 6 weeks. Every 6 weeks, we have an opportunity to realign, to change our ideas and to change our priorities more so than anything based on what we see. Oh, what happened when we launched this? What did we learn? What are customers telling us? What do we think? What have we... There's just a constant iterative force being applied to the process because we're not locking ourselves into decisions. This is what also often happens with enterprise software. These big enterprises, they don't just want to buy a product today. They want to buy a product 2 years from now, 3 years from now. What can it do next? What can it do tomorrow? And when you get into those kinds of negotiations, you end up committing to roadmaps. Oh, no, we don't have that feature right now, but it is coming in Q4. Just wait, hold on for Q4. Then we will deliver whatever you're asking for. It's a terrible way to run a piece of software. I think by the time you've committed to a long-term roadmap, you bound your hands in the past. You bound your hands to ideas about what's important that are, in some cases, literally years out of date. But that's what you have to do to make the sale. So I see how it happens, and I also relish that we don't. What we can run our long-term direction on is not specific concrete goals in terms of features or revenue or customers. We can run our business in the long term on a set of values. How do we want to show up? What kind of mode do we want to develop with? So, for example, we started this conversation talking about how to work long hours, or rather how not to work long hours. That's one of the values. We want to build great software in a sustainable way. And I don't necessarily, it could also mean green, but it doesn't in this case. It just means humanly sustainable. It means I want to build the kind of company that I could see myself at for the next 20 years. I can't see myself sprinting for 60, 80 hours over 20 years. In fact, I have been at this company for now over 20 years, and we haven't done these things. And this is why I'm excited to continue. A lot of these software businesses are built on a get big, get rich quick model, which again, do you know what? Maybe we need some of that. I think we probably do. There's some kinds of problems that involve this, what did they call it? The blitz scaling. Wasn't that the name of the book? Blitz scaling, that you try to capture as much territory as quickly as possible, and you will raise fantastical sums of money, and you will hire armies of developers, and you'll just throw it all into the meat grinder of growth. Okay, that's certainly one path, and we can have that. I would also like another path. I don't want to go into a meat grinder of growth. I would just like to build great software with a small team of people who really care about it and sell it to final end users who can appreciate it. Like, that's perhaps a modest goal. I don't actually think our success is modest at all. We've been around for 20 years. We've been profitable since day one. We've made hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue over those years. And Jason and I have owned this company together and shared in the profits every single year. So when I account for this approach to business, I'm often countered with, well, that's nice. That's a nice little lifestyle business. And I always think, like, first of all, what's wrong with having a lifestyle? Like, what is actually the alternative to that claim? That's a nice not lifestyle business. That's a nice zombie business. What is the opposite we're fighting against here? Why wouldn't you want to build a business and have a nice lifestyle? I can also steelman that and see, do you know what? Some people in our society should have ambition to literally shoot for the stars. I am glad that group of people exist. But do you know what? If you're building B2B accounting software, you're not fucking going to Mars, are you? So maybe let off the Elon fumes here and don't kind of flatter yourself thinking that what you're doing is as consequential as grabbing a fucking Statue of Liberty-sized rocket with chopsticks out of the air, right? It's just more mundane than that. And that's okay. I don't have any inferiority complex when it comes to that. I make, as the joke often goes, I make to-do list software management. I make project management tools. I really care about that problem. I think it impacts a lot of people. It's not space rockets. It doesn't require the space rocket man ethics or approach to engineering. And I wish we were able to appreciate both of those things. That I can look at something like firing rockets towards Mars and go like, that's amazing. I am inspired by that. And also it has surprisingly little bearing on the mundane B2B software that I make, that I don't have to apply all of the lessons here. I don't have to imply even the intensity of what someone like Elon brings to his problem solving, because we're just not working in the same domains. I find a lot of people seem to have an existential dread acknowledging that fact. What they work on is just more mundane. And we need that. Do you know what? I don't know actually if Tesla or SpaceX or whatever uses Basecamp. Maybe some team did at one point, but they need something. Like we all need to contribute. Like for SpaceX to fire their rockets to the moon, like their fax machine in an earlier era had to work. And today their printer still has to work, right? Someone has to make that printer work. Someone has to still produce the pens. Someone has to produce their product management software. Someone has to produce their email system. Like, these are all worthy contributions we all make to society, and there's no reason to feel embarrassed by that, I'd say. Again, if you have this burning urge and you have a little Elon in your stomach, great. We need a few of those. And then we need like 99.999% of the humanity to not be that, because otherwise we'd literally just go crazy. There's not room for that level of intensity in the rest of it. So that means we can commit to more modest goals. We want to have this nice, sustainable business, which means we need to make a profit. For example, that's one of the financial goals that we have. It's not that, we need to increase year-over-year growth by 40%. No, can we just stay profitable? Can we still have some growth so that we're not shrinking, so that we can still sustain the activities that we have? Do you know what? That's going to be good. And then anything else that's on top of that is gravy. I choose to invest my time thinking about the first order effects, that if we build a great product and we position it in a compelling way, if we share a lot of things, if we create awareness that way, do you know what? Downstream from all of those activities will be a nice business. Is it going to be this big or that big? I don't know. But it's also not in my control. I can control my inputs. I can't control what the market does or reacts. I can't control competitors. I can't control customers. I can control my efforts. I can do everything to the best of my abilities and the best of my knowledge. And what more is there? It's not like if I'm already doing my best according to what I know best, what's like going to 11? Like the dial is already turned up to max. There's not more. The only thing that's more is a sense of dread, a sense of, do you know what? I should have done this, a sense of regret. Oh, why didn't we do this? A sense of sort of self-loathing. Oh, I'm not good enough. I don't have time for any of that shit. I'm building a lifestyle business. I'm building a business that's going to build a very nice lifestyle for me, my employees, my business partner, and our customers. Okay, that's enough.
I love this. So refreshing. One final thing to wrap up with. There is, I read somewhere like a while ago, you posted a programmer, an ad for hiring programmer for your team. And then it said that apart from the rest of the benefits, there was a revenue share. And it immediately got me curious about how does this incentive contribute to, the belonging they feel in the company and the value they create and the autonomy and everything we discussed before, like the state of flow, creating that whole culture. So I want to understand how you do it, and maybe if you have any action points for companies that you would like to consider, what are the things that come from it, basically, and how you can implement that in a team?
Maybe I'm going to disappoint you here. I don't think that program has a lot of day-to-day impact on the people who work here. I think it is a very nice program that I'm proud that we have. The program is the 10% of yearly profits are distributed to employees according to a share that's determined by seniority. We don't actually determine it by position, rank. Everyone contributes in that profit sharing plan on an equal basis based on how long they've been with the company. They start accruing shares in the revenue sharing program after 2 years. They will max out after 6 years, and then there's sort of a special additional bonus at 10 years. It runs once a year in spring when we finalized our books for the previous year. And I do think it's a nice validation that you are directly connected in some way to the health of the business. Note that it's not a stock program. It's not RSUs. It's not connected to what other people think about what the business does, which is what a stock price is. Mm-hmm. This is connected to whether we are profitable. And as such, it may also swing. I mean, I suppose stock prices swing wildly too. Our profits probably swing far less than the majority of publicly traded companies do. But it is still kind of an unknown. It is still a bonus in its most sort of intrinsic sense that you should not rely on it. You should not base your market rate on it. You have to treat it as though it's kind of just money that shows up from the ferry at once a year. So I don't think it has a huge impact on the day-to-day. I do think, it's part of feeling good about working at a place where you are participating in the upside, if you will, or at least in the health of the business. I do think that's very good. But I think these other factors we've discussed, like working with exceptionally talented people who are being allowed to do the best work of their career because we're not fucking interrupting them every 5 seconds, is actually more meaningful, or at least it's more immediate, I should certainly say. I won't comment. We've had people who've made very large sums of money off this program, including in roles that don't traditionally see that kind of upside. We have a bunch of people working support at our company. They participate in this profit sharing plan just as well as a senior designer or programmer does. So I am proud to distribute that. I love these stories of early Microsoft, for example, where, one of the first secretaries ended up being this multimillionaire because she got a stake in the business when it was worth nothing. And then that turned into a lot. I just saw another stat from NVIDIA saying something like 2/3 of the people who work there turned into be millionaires. That's amazing. We're not a $1 billion company. That's not what we mint. We don't mint just like millionaires left, right, and center. But we do share. And I do think that's a really meaningful, good part of Silicon Valley culture. This idea that employees have a stake in it. I have a lot of critiques as to how that often manifests itself, how these stock options are dangled in front of people, and then they very often end up meaning less than nothing, right? They were kind of compensation for something, and it didn't turn out to be anything. A lot of the times, they literally are lottery coupons. Like, you're like, do you know what? It's worth nothing right now, but maybe in 7 years will be the next NVIDIA and it'll be worth a lot. I don't know. Maybe I've softened my stance on that over the years, but I still think a lot of people would prefer money in their pocket today than a lottery coupon that could potentially be worth a ton 10 years from now. And we can have both. It doesn't have to be either or. We can have the shot of kind of a unicorn, and that could be an option. And then we can also have, again, more mundane businesses like ours. We're never going to be some $100 billion company. That's not in the cards. That's not what we're aiming for. That's not what we're trying to go for. It's not what we feel bad about having reached. We're very comfortable saying, you know what, we're about 60 people here at 37 Signals. We make these kinds of products. We make new products. We have a lot of fun and meaning in the work that we do. And also, it's unlikely you're going to be able to buy a private jet with the money that you get from the profit sharing plan here. Okay. Do you want to sign up for those terms? We have a lot of people who've been here for a very long time. We were just together, the entire company. We meet up twice a year, and we were in Montreal last week. And one of the celebrations was for a designer I've worked with for 15 years.
Oh, wow.
And I go like, do you know what? Love that. Not exclusively. I also love talking with new people. I think having some steady new blood is actually healthy for an organizational organism. But I also think it's quite nice that you can have someone who's worked for you for 15 years. And the average tenure, I believe, in tech is something like 18 months. That's not that common.
Yeah.
Either way, I think the fact of these bonuses, in some ways, the less you think about them on a day-to-day basis, the better things are. Now, maybe that's easy for me to say. Maybe that's not actually true. But it's certainly what I'd like to believe to be true, that you're not on a weekly basis thinking like, how does this connect to a bonus? Because now you're again into these outcomes instead of focusing on what you control. I control whether I show up and do really good work that I'm proud of, and then I just trust that that's hopefully going to lead to something good. It won't always. Sometimes you can put in the best work on the most novel problem, and it just won't be the right time. The market won't be ready. Customers won't understand it. There's a billion beautiful products that have never taken off. And then there's another billion of shit products that have gone to the moon because they were at the right place at the right time with just an okay solution. And that was enough. So this isn't about fairness. That's just not the kind of planet this is. You don't get back in exact proportion to what you get in. There's a huge variance. But what else are you going to do? What else are you going to aspire to, if not to build great things and putting beautiful products and services into the world? And then hopefully you're also lucky a bit of the way, and what you have responds to market needs, and you find your product market fit, and it pans out. But if it doesn't, at least perhaps you had a good journey.
This is an amazing way to wrap up the conversation. Thanks again, David. It was a great pleasure having you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.